Tonight is Monday, October 22nd, 2018. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. It is 7:00 p.m. We will call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Jerry?
The map on page 39 of the packet is in error.
39?
Yep.
Oh, okay. But that's not going to change our agenda item.
No.
It will not.
Yeah, well, just when it comes to it, we'll make that note. Okay. Anything else? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our October 8th, 2018 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 5 through 7. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 8 and concludes with the resolution on page 26. And includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000. To Eaton Cooper for AMI meters for $11,985. To Ethan Cooper again for AMI meters, 30 of them, for $47,430. The following appointments are being made by the St. Peter Fire Department. Daryl Pettis as Captain 1. Eric Christensen as Lieutenant 2. The following equipment is declared surplus and will be redirected to the Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic at a price of $26,000, a Bobcat 5600 Toolcat, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for October 4th, 2018 through October 17th, 2018. Are there any questions, comments on the consent agenda? John?
I have a question for Public Works. The 300 meters for the AMI, those are the smart meters, the electric meters. Why 300? Is that how many we use in a year anticipated, or?
Pete, if you would. And while Pete's going up there, the reason that there are two separate purchases is that these are electric meters that serve different purposes. The first set that you see, 50, are what we would call for our larger users that have demand requirements on them, and the 300 are what we would consider our residential units. So Pete?
That's correct. The 300 and the 50 units are based on our budgetary numbers, John. Remember when we started doing the AMI system, the idea behind the AMI numbers was that we wanted to be able to put meters into homes and not increase rates in order to accomplish our tasks. So this is a budgetary number. If additional funding comes available through the budget process, we'll add more meters, but this way we'll have them on January 1 or shortly thereafter, and then we can proceed to install them during the winter time.
So we've got 3,000 or 4,000 to do with this 300. We're on a 10-year program, or is this?
Yeah, roughly 7 to 8. There's a certain amount of residential meters, as Todd had spoken, and then there's more commercial and industrial meters.
We're making enough progress to use up 300 in a year.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Maybe a little bit of background for the folks at home about why the hospital is going to get a Bobcat.
This is something that was previously approved by the hospital commission to purchase. Pete and his team set the price based on the council's direction, and we were purchasing a new one. The one that we're selling here is actually, I believe, a 2008. And as you may recall, with the number of units that we have, all the attachments don't quick connect. There's been some changes in the series moving forward. So this is one that is different from the rest. And so this number was set by what its trade-in value was. And again, the Hospital Commission approved it. These are the tool cats, so I'm trying to think, so it's not exactly a skid steer, what people might think of as a skid steer. It looks more like a golf cart on steroids, and it can handle blowers and other things as well, and we found them really, really efficient and tough machines for us.
But, so like snow removal, hauling
Snow
stuff around.
removal, brooming, all kinds of different things we use them for, yeah.
Jared, or Steve, I'm sorry.
As a member of the Hospital Commission, the commission is very excited to get this piece of equipment.
This will be just perfect for
Right.
them. It has a number of hours on it, but their use is less than Pete's crew, and it'll be just perfect for the kind of nooks and crannies and other things that they have to get into and make use of it.
Any other questions? The resolution for approval consent agenda appears on page 26. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second it.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grant.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Combs.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Douglas.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next is unfinished business, which there is none, so we will move into new business. And the first one is for the bed and breakfast ordinance. And Todd, you want to make a comment on this?
Yeah, let me start this one out. This starts on page 27, and Mayor and Council, you have a couple of different options as you normally do, but we're coming to you actually tonight to recommend that you table this issue, and Russ can explain the reason that we're tabling it, not for any significant issue other than the ordinance that is included in your packet is not the final one that was recommended by Planning and Zoning. And we could make the changes on the fly here if you wanted to, but since there's not a time-driven need to make this change within the next 2 weeks, well, frankly, it'll be the next 3 weeks until we have a council meeting. But within the next 3 weeks, we'd love to bring you back the nice, clean version rather than making the changes on the fly. But we'll have Russ explain the couple of issues that are different from what's in your packet to the final version that was recommended by Planning and Zoning. So Russ, if you could do that briefly.
Yeah, I apologize. We start out with an original copy of the ordinance, goes to the Planning Commission. They obviously have the ability to make changes, which they've done. The copy that I provided for the council packet does not reflect those changes, but actually is the original that I had presented to the Planning Commission, so I apologize for that. And I would suggest that it be tabled so we can get that. It comes down to the bed and breakfast or vacation rental by owner operations in town right now are not operating within the confines of the ordinance. So the intent was then to draft an amendment to the ordinance that would accommodate those uses, and actually it would free up some ability to have a vacation rental by owner. So I don't know if we intend to get into the full public hearing issues, but I'd suggest that the issue be tabled so we can make sure that what you have in front of you is what the Planning Commission had recommended.
John?
There should be a motion.
Unless there's other discussion, is there any discussion about it now?
Again, the staff recommendation is to table, and if you table, it's a simple motion and voice vote to table until your next council meeting.
I move we table this to our next regular scheduled council meeting.
Second.
Suzie, second. Any questions at this time? All in favor of tabling this, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We will table this till our next meeting, our scheduled meeting, regular meeting. All right, next up, we have a city code modification for the C5 permitted areas.
Yeah.
Russ again.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, Vertical Growth owns the former Mayo Clinic building at 622 Sunrise Drive. It is currently occupied by H&R Block, by Sam and Abe's Daycare, as well as the St. Peter Islamic Center. There remains one vacant space within that building, and they had been approached and they had negotiated the occupancy of that commercial space with an organization that does nutritional and weight loss counseling. As I reviewed the ordinance, those uses would not be allowed within the C5, either as a permitted use of land or as a conditional use of land. And in a zoning ordinance, if you are not on either of those rosters, you're outright prohibited. And the state law then would prohibit specifically providing a use variance or allowing a use that is not listed on that roster. So to remedy the matter, we reviewed the ordinance, and the use classification that their contemplated use would fit in, it would be considered a personal improvement service. And that is defined as an establishment primarily engaged in the provision of informational, instructional, personal improvement, and similar services of a non-professional nature. Typical uses include photography studios, driving studios, health or fitness studios, reducing salons, dance studios, handicraft, and hobby instruction. I would suggest that their proposed use would fit more appropriately as a reducing salon. As such, then, they have petitioned and paid the appropriate fee for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to add, then, personal improvement services to the permitted uses allowed within the C5 district. We provided a public hearing on the matter in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission received no public testimony regarding the amendment other than from the applicant or the applicant's representative. And ultimately, the Planning Commission then has recommended that you adopt the ordinance providing for personal improvement services as a permitted use in the C5 zoning districts. There are 3 C5 zoning districts, the first one being the property in question along Sunrise Drive. It would include this property all the way north to Traverse, which would include then the River of Life Church and the uses between that and the clinic. The School Board Association property, as well as the Scholarship America properties, are in a C5 district. And the last C5 district would include the Dirk's Eye Clinic, the former KRBI studio, and the Diamond Dust property. Mr. Mayor, I'd make myself available to answer any questions you or the council may have.
Okay. Questions? For those of you that are on the planning and zoning, were there any questions raised then? Nothing? Okay. All right. If there are no questions, the ordinance for amending the St. Peter City Code to additional roster of permitted uses within the C5 Business Professional Office District appears on pages 34 and 35. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Now, any questions? Call the roll, please, Bart.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Quinn.
Aye.
Mayor Zima.
Aye.
Councilmember Carla.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Ordinance is approved. Next up, we have another city code modification for the residential overlay district. And Russ again.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, as the 1115 South Minnesota Avenue property was rezoned to accommodate the strip mall, which includes the CCF Bank and the Dunkin' Donuts store, members of the council, members of the Planning Commission had expressed concerns regarding what I'll call the commercial encroachment of the highway uses down or towards the historic downtown uses. At a workshop discussion that you had held, there was considerable debate regarding the matter, and from that discussion, I was able then to identify what were considered to be 5 goals. The first one be to maintain the existing highway commercial, residential, historic downtown, residential, highway commercial development pattern and experience of the Minnesota Avenue corridor, to separate the historic downtown with its pedestrian orientation experience from the intensive vehicular traffic generated by highway commercial developments by utilizing the existing residential districts as a buffer. Thirdly, to conserve the historic residential setting, scale, character, and experience of the Minnesota Square Park neighborhood, to preserve the existing vistas from the Minnesota Square Park Pavilion, Veterans Memorial, and other park amenities, and lastly, to protect the solemnity, earnestness, and desired individual experiences at the Veterans Memorial site within Minnesota Square Park. The goals were brought back to you, and you encouraged us then to go forward and to draft an ordinance, and we have done as much. I will note that the ordinance does not in any way change the uses that can be allowed or contemplated within the districts. Rather, it would regulate the redevelopment of properties within that district to maintain some type of standards to achieve the 5 goals that the City Council had addressed. The ordinance addresses such issues as accessibility. There will be no front yard curb cuts provided within the proposed districts. The majority of that property is on Highway 169, and additional curb cuts would not be permitted by the Minnesota Department of Transportation. All vehicular parking within the district would be provided within the rear of the property. It would be required to provide one pedestrian walkway connecting the public sidewalk along the road frontage to the front door of the structure. Redevelopment would be restricted to a single doorway facing Minnesota Avenue or Minnesota Square Park. If it would be used or redeveloped as a duplex, one of the units would be loaded from the front, the other unit would be loaded from the rear. If a site is demolished for redevelopment, which would be contemplated in the ordinance, the redevelopment would be limited to 80% or up to 125% of the footprint of the original structure that was demolished. New construction would have a minimum roof pitch of 412 to avoid an institutional large commercial appearance. Lamp posts, light posts, and flag poles and other such appurtenance items within the front yard or within the site would be limited to 12 feet in height to maintain a human scale. And if fencing is established within the front yard of the sites, it would be limited to 4 feet in height. All lighting on the site would be utilized using full cutoff or zero cutoff light fixtures. Any allowed signage would not be able to be internally or externally illuminated. Finally, if new construction, no new construction shall be provided within the established front or side yards. All new construction would have to be within the rear. You should not further subdivide individual parcels, nor shall you then combine multiple parcels for a large development. Those are essentially the regulations. In my opinion, it's a balance between the commercial and the preservation of the neighborhoods in Minnesota Square Park experience. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the matter. We had provided postcard notices to those that would be impacted. I should note also that we did have a public meeting in July where everyone impacted by the proposed district was invited by postcard. Attendance was substantially limited, but those that did appear, the residential property owners were in consideration that the rulings would be appropriate. As Councilman Pfeiffer noted, the map on page 39 is in error. As I copied the map from page 40, I accidentally centered it on 3rd Street rather than Minnesota Square or Minnesota Avenue. Okay. So the map on page 40 would be correct. And the map on page 39 would need to be shifted to the east a full block to be centered on Minnesota Avenue rather than on 3rd Street. Mr. Mayor, the Planning Commission has recommended that you adopt the ordinance that is presented to you tonight, and I would answer any questions that you or members of the commission may have.
Okay. Jerry?
Just to clarify some things, if indeed one of the homes were destroyed by fire or natural disaster or whatever, I'm sure that it would not be, if somebody found a nice Victorian home would fit into that space to move in, but I'm wondering how about a stick-built would be fine, but I'm wondering about a manufactured home where it looks like a double wide. I'm sure that would not be.
Well, the state law would require that we consider a double wide to be a single-family house as long as it's established on a foundation. So the only restriction in this case, I believe, would be the roof pitch. That would have to have at least a 412. And I should have mentioned, Councilman Pfeiffer, that if the property is destroyed by peril, by fire, by tornado, natural disaster, this ordinance would be superseded by state statute, which would now allow them to rebuild as long as they got a building permit within 6 months. They could build exactly what they had on the footprint. If you recall, when the house next to Ms. Garland burnt down, it was a non-conforming house. It didn't meet the setbacks, but they were able to get a building permit within 6 months. So a couple years ago, the state changed that law to provide more property rights, if you will.
Thank you.
Susie?
First of all, I'm really glad for the clarification about that map on 39, because when I was looking at this, I kept thinking, I don't remember 3rd Street ever being a part of this. So just to clarify again for everyone at home, 3rd Street is not a part of this proposed ordinance.
The map on page 40 is correct. The map on page 39 is the map on page 40 shifted 1 block to the west.
When I was reading through the building design and construction, one item caught my attention, which was item number 6 at the bottom of page 42, the fencing in front yards. What is the description of, What constitutes a front yard, I guess is my question.
Anything within the front of the structure.
So-
It's based upon how far back the structure is set.
Okay,
So if the front facade of the structure is 20 feet, you got a 20-foot front yard.
Okay.
If the house is set back much further than the setbacks would require, it's still the front of the house.
There is a definition within your zoning ordinance that provides exact definition and clarification on that.
so the one thing that occurs to me is that many homeowners like to have privacy fences, and in most cases, a privacy fence is a standard of 5 or 6 feet. And so if they wanted to have a privacy fence in their backyard and side yards, I wouldn't want this ordinance to prevent people from being able to continue that fence to the natural, whatever that natural breakpoint might be. But I could see a situation where allowing a 5-foot fence on the side yards would be
Yeah, on the side
acceptable and
yards, they can go
appropriate.
up to 7, within the side or rear yard. That's
Right.
code.
I'm not talking the side yard, I'm just talking the property line between this house and its neighboring house.
In the front.
In the front. So there, I can imagine a situation in which somebody would want to have that 5-foot fence extend past to the very corner of their house. And so maybe there's some way we could word this to allow for that. If it's on the, in the vicinity of the property line and doesn't extend too far to the front, I think that we probably have some cases where this already exists along Minnesota Avenue.
Yeah, I mean, the ordinance could be whatever the council decides it should be. My experience would be that generally the residences would have the greatest need for privacy in the side and the rear, so that people aren't looking into their windows perhaps from the neighbor, but generally the expectation of privacy within the front yard is less. But certainly, Ms. Carlin, the ordinance can have any height you'd want.
The side yard would stop parallel to the
Right.
front of the home.
And I understand, it's just that some of these homes, which are situated on 169, may benefit from having a privacy fence that extends a little bit further from what we're talking about. And so that would be the only thing. I don't want to limit the livability of people's backyards and side yards through this ordinance. So I would propose that the fence could extend, I don't know, 10 feet past the house, or it could extend, no more than 20 feet from the road, something along those lines, just to allow people to build as much privacy fence as they may want so that they can block the noise and the traffic.
Well, I have an opinion on this just by what you just said. I mean, if you look now, and if there's a house like that, I think there may be one, but I think there's stops. Then we're kind of detracting, if we have these big fences going all the way to the front, we're detracting from the appearance of the houses that we're trying to preserve and show off. To me, a good example is right on College Avenue in, I can't remember, it just changed hands here not too long ago again, in the middle of the block, the first block, second block, it's kind of a
I know the
tan-colored
house.
house. They have the higher fence to the side and around to the back, but when they reach the front, it's just like that, and it looks great. But if I was looking at that the other day, if that was higher up, all you'd see would be the pitch of the roof, and that's not, I don't think, what we want to accomplish.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But
And again, I
we
wouldn't
can
want...
revisit it, but
Sorry to interrupt. I wouldn't suggest that the taller fence could go across the front of the property. I'm merely suggesting the fence line that runs parallel to the street could possibly extend a little bit further. So it's not blocking the view of the house, it's just blocking their view of their neighbors. That's all.
Jeff,
What does this new provision talk about when we're talking about like arborvitae or shrubbery? Could they do that in front of their home to accentuate the home, but also to provide some blocking of the noise and sound?
Yeah, I don't believe our ordinance includes the shrubbery as a fence. Some do. From what I remember of ours, it does not.
So they could tightly grow a row of whatever they wanted to
if you wanted to.
and have that privacy, so to speak, as well. Okay.
So, but we can revisit that. It's nothing that I don't think we need to do in this case here now for this, but we can revisit that at a future. Ed?
I think you already answered this question, Russ, but I'm asking anyway. I'm talking about the business that's on number 206, right, the chiropractic business.
206 Walnut.
From Walnut Street.
Oh, yeah, yes, okay.
Okay, so that's already a operating business. Now, just out of curiosity, if the owners now or owners down the road would like to expand that business, would it be possible that they could buy the lot next to them and add on, or is this lot?
In this instance, no. No, everything would be maintained with the same lots there. You couldn't combine lots and you couldn't sever a lot.
But they could reconstruct up to 125% of the current footprint, but not less than 80% of the current footprint.
As long as they met the setback requirements.
Correct, thank you.
So they could actually add on to their building.
They could go up.
Theoretically, I don't want to give anybody the
No, I
impression
know
that
what
we
I mean.
measured it, but
Right, but I mean, if
Theoretically,
they're
yes.
within the setbacks, they could add on.
The only reason I ask is it's just a business that's been in St. Peter for a long time, and now we're just locking them into that size. They probably don't want to, but eventually down the road, if a business buys it, they might wish to.
Well, I think we carved out the one gas station, didn't we?
Yeah,
You mean Clark Station.
at the recommendation of the Planning Commission and at the recommendation of the owner of the Clark Station, the
Right,
Planning Commission
yep.
did recommend that removal.
Well, did this property that Ed's talking about, did that ever come up at all?
It was not.
And I'm just using that property as a for instance.
No, it's a good
I don't-
example, you know, I mean, it
I haven't
fringes
found
on the
anybody
commercial
that-
area now.
But it's already a commercial business, and
it is likely a property that currently meets the rules related to the aesthetic of the building with the roof pitch. And so that's why it wasn't included. If the council chooses to carve it out, you can certainly carve it out.
John?
This process, this ordinance has been a little unusual, a little more contentious than some. Typically, the planning commission and staff work together, come to some agreements, ideas, and staff prepares it. Commission passes it 7-0 and goes on to the council. In this case, the original impetus came from the council to the planning commission, and they worked with staff on the language, the wording of the ordinance, and came to agreement, and that's pretty much what's in here. What is unusual is that this proposal and the proposed wording and the proposed map was taken to the EDA as a courtesy just to present. A courtesy to present to the EDA. Majority of the EDA members were, sure, yeah, not really. One member, though, was very strongly opposed to this, saying that commercial development along 169 should be encouraged, not discouraged, and felt very strongly in opposition to this ordinance. As Russ said, we had a public meeting for people who lived on 169 and around Minnesota Square, lightly attended, but all of those who came were in favor of the ordinance. My understanding is that staff then took this idea to a meeting of business people downtown, where once again, there were a couple of people who spoke very strongly that commercial development along 169 should be allowed. I'm not sure they intend that all the houses could be torn down and replaced by fast food places or such, but certainly there should be more development along 169 to take advantage of the traffic that goes through every day. When it came back to planning and zoning, one member on the planning and zoning was very much in favor of that approach also, saying that the residential neighborhoods are nice, north and south, but commercial development is more important. All the traffic is there, and we should be taking advantage of it, and we could use the additional property taxes that would be generated by commercial development. The other 6 members disagreed with him. What was also unusual is that staff brought back a map on what should be included, and the planning commission didn't accept that recommendation of the map. They added to the south the Engritzer House south of Clark Street. On the north end, they added the church that's right next to MGM Liquors. Both of those were in addition. The third thing that was talked about were the houses across the street from the American on North Minnesota. The 6 members who are in favor of the ordinance in some fashion or another are split 3-3 on whether they should be included or not. And the person against the ordinance, of course, voted against it also, so including those houses failed on a 3-4 vote. When the American was built, I voted for that. This was a number of years ago. I'm a very old person. I voted for that. What persuaded me was that it was being rezoned to be put into a residential district, but the look of the building was much like an apartment building. Maybe an apartment building, the parking lot would have been on the west side instead of up against the street, and I suggested that, but it was rejected many years ago. I've certainly gotten over that, I think. Anyway, very residential in neighborhood, very residential in appearance, and it fit the houses across the street. That's still the case, and I was one of the 3 that voted in favor of including those houses as part of this district. And I would like to hear if there is support for that on the council to include those houses in the district.
Anyone? I can give you my opinion, if that's what you're looking for. If one of them, I'm one of 7 of us here.
Nobody's opinion is more important than yours, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Wait, how many years has it taken now for you to realize that? I do not think they should, I guess in walking that down there next to the O'Reilly right now, and walking down there, I don't think there's a need to preserve those in there, because I just think here I get the highest and best use, and when the proximity there to me, would outweigh saving those houses. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's just my opinion when I looked at it after we talked about it last week. The other thing I would like to say is, it's not that you can't have, and you know this, John, and that we can't have a commercial operation or business operation in these houses that exists there, and that's, Dr. Haight operated a chiropractic clinic for years, in the building real close, or in this district. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I think I know who the person is, that when they talk about the taxes and the taxes on commercial property, if they're equal amounts for say 300,000 and another 300,000 in taxes for commercial, the taxes on the commercial are higher, but most of that goes to the state. The state collects taxes on commercial. That's all what they're getting taxed, commercial and seasonal rec, or cabins and things like that. So as far as it generating more tax dollars for St. Peter, it's really very minimal, but from that regard. So, I think I'm going to add another thing, and this came up when I was out and about here last week. Cognizant of noise pollution caused by some of these businesses. It's not just right there in the houses next door. It flows over to the people on Front Street and, other directions too. So, that get affected by some of the noises created by some of these commercial properties. So I would agree with what the ordinance that we have laid out for us here tonight. I don't see the need for those 3, but that's my opinion. Anyone else?
Well, I'll give you my perspective on Planning and Zoning Commission. I was one of the 4 that said no to the original boundaries. You've got the American, and then to the north of that, you've got the vacant Shell station, which at some point is going to become something, I'm confident. And when that does happen, it's going to also create more noise. You've got the American where people park and they point their headlights directly at the people that live across the street anyway. And I'm not sure that the people across the street really enjoy that, but it's there. And it's been there for about 20 years now, I would say. And so
At least
at least 20 years. And so from that perspective,
28, I think.
when we talked about that greenhouse in the area, and it was being leveled, and it was being built into the O'Reillys that is there now. And, you know, the other homeowners are obviously they're living there. They don't have for sale signs or anything like that. Knowing that behind that is a floodplain, and so the land is kind of landlocked in some extent. You can't go further to the east anyway. There's just not a lot of use besides residential right now, but in the future, there could be more commercial development in that area. And so that's why I supported what you see here tonight.
Any other comments? Question? Susie, did you have something? I'm sorry. No?
I mean, my input is just that that's the same justification for sort of unzippering the whole downtown at some point. So if those 3 homes were to become a commercial strip mall, then one could argue the same thing, that the homes just south of that point, well, they're right on the edge now, so we might as well allow those in too. So in my mind, including as much land as residential land as possible would be my preference, just, you know, drawing the line to the north and to the south until it abuts existing commercial properties.
But it does stop at those, after those 3 properties. There is no more.
Then maybe I'm misunderstanding,
Because
If
there's
you
no
go to
right
page 40,
right?
okay?
I'm not talking north of that point, I'm talking south. I'm saying that to me, I don't understand why we wouldn't include them in protect. Am I misunderstanding? My understanding is that they are not included in the ordinance.
No, they're not.
Okay.
At this point.
So
And
I'm
that's-
suggesting that
yeah.
those 3 homes, as they are, provide a buffer to the commercial district further to the north. So we might as well include them in
Oh,
as
I
part
see.
of that buffer.
I see. Okay. Anyone else?
Members, you do have an ordinance that's been recommended by Planning and Zoning and has gone through the appropriate process. That ordinance starts on page 41.
Right. Now, once again, we talked about this a week ago, and at that time I said, you know, if we aren't comfortable, if we need more discussion on it, just like the first item, new business tonight, we can table this if we do want to talk about it some more. You know, I would need a motion to do that. I'm not sure if anything's going to change, but we can all, by all means, this isn't, once again, a rush situation to change this. So if there is not a motion to table, we will move on to the ordinance amending the St. Peter Code Land Use Regulations and Zoning for the Residential Preservation Overlay District. Appears on pages 41 through 43. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the ordinance, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Pawnee,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Ordinance is approved. Next up, we have an annexation request for property next to Warren Park. Russ?
Yeah, Mayor Zeman, members of the city council, will wrap up the planning and zoning section of your program. In the 1990s, when Westview subdivision, the first phase, was developed, the developer owed the city a 2/3 of an acre, 0.67 acre of land, parkland dedication. For unknown reasons, that was never accomplished. It was never followed through until, I believe it was early 2017, that I was able to obtain a quit claim of 2/3 of an acre adjacent to Warren Park from the Enns family to satisfy that 1990s parkland dedication. That is a area that was identified in the previous and current park plan. As Westview is further subdivided, additional parkland dedications will be required, and it is anticipated that Warren Park will continue then to be expanded to the west. Given that you own the property wholly, the state statute allows you to annex that property by ordinance. And given that you own the property wholly, there is no need to have a public hearing on the matter. So staff is recommending that you provide for adoption of the ordinance in your packet that provides for the 2/3 acre annexation and then the expansion of Warren Park. The property was farmed by the Inns family last year because we had not given them notice before October deadline, so we had to allow them to farm it. This year, it has been laying idle, and Public Works then has graded and has seeded the 2/3 of an acre. So it's ready to be added to Warren Park, and I should note for those at home that this does not have any impact whatsoever on the tree or scrub line that's pre-existing in that park. And if anything's going to be done, those decisions will be made by someone else at a later date. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you'd have.
All right, questions? Not the ordinance annexing 0.67 acres to the city of St. Peter appears on page 49 and 50. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Jerry. Any other any questions now? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Quinn.
Aye.
Ordinance is approved. Thank you, Russ. Next up, we have a generator maintenance contract renewal. Mr. Moulton.
You got the one I had last week.
Mayor Zeman and St. Peter City Council. For you tonight, I have a request to authorize Advanced Power Solutions of Hopkins, Minnesota, to provide maintenance for the 16 city generators that we currently have. And with the majority of the maintenance performed on our Broadway generation facility, which is a 12 megawatt unit up there. As you guys are aware, in 2004, we built the generation facility. The first 10 years of operation, Cat Ziegler operated and maintained that facility for us. The next 5 years, Cummins Power and Equipment was authorized to do that maintenance. What you have before you is a regular proposal that we had sent out, advertised on the city's website for written proposals. We had 4 very interested parties. They came to a pre-bid meeting and met with your mechanic, who walked them through the entire sites of this facility and all of the facilities from that point. And as you're aware, quick start generators are very important to the city operation here. They're also very important and valuable because we operate this on the MISO market. And our Simpa partners market this for us, and we have to have these units on call and ready to run at a moment's notice. We are falling into an area where these units are being called a little more frequently because of the use of renewable energy within the markets nowadays, and quick starts are used to offset any deficiencies that renewables have. So they're a great balance from that point of view. We don't always control the wind, we don't always control the sun, so there's a lot of fluctuating power that we can add stability to. It's important that we maintain these units, that we have everything in operating condition. They are in excellent shape. We want to keep them that way. When this 5-year contract is up, our contract with Simpa will be up. We'll be renewing and hopefully renegotiating that contract in the future, and we want to have a valuable resource to market that. I have a breakdown on page 52 that talks about the individual cost in each area. If there's any questions there, I'd be glad to fill that. Main things that we try to maintain on this is fluids, batteries. We do semi-annual and annual testing in a variety of different areas. Those are all put in the specification. It is not attached right here, just the cost is. But we also do load testing to make sure the units can function in the manners that we've had designed for. We're asking that Advanced Power Systems be authorized. The annual contract will be about $49,285. 5-year total will be about $246,425. The funding breakdown on page 53 talks about the individual areas where we will have budgeted funds for to keep this maintenance program in operation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Pete? Steve?
Pete, you mentioned that on your letter there are 16 generators, is that correct?
Yep,
Are they located near the areas that you're identified on page 52?
that's correct.
So there's multiple ones at those different locations?
Yeah, the generation plant on top of the hill by the Broadway Water Plant, there's 6
Okay.
generators. They're 3516 cat engines that produce about 2 megawatts each of electric.
Okay. So then, my next question is, it says that if all the generators were operating, you can produce 21.25 million watts, is that
Yep,
correct?
megawatts, yep.
So then, how much of, what, would that produce enough power for the whole city or not?
It wouldn't. Our peak was a little higher than that this year, but these generators operate independently. So if you take the generation plant where we have the large generations, they feed into transmission lines. And we could do a black start and do some switching over and energize the city if we wanted to. And then if we could operate all of these facilities, we could come real close to meeting the load of the city.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Keep in mind, though, when we're doing this, that doesn't take into account some of the peak demands that would be instantaneous. So these are generators that have a capacity that would produce power to a certain level. Might not be able to meet our peak capacity all the time, so you might
Okay.
experience different operational things there.
All right, thanks, Pete.
Anyone else? Ed?
Pete, there's a pretty big difference between these bids? Does that concern you at all, or if you worked with this company
You know,
before?
as long as I have 2 companies that are very close in their bid, that's what I look for in that. You really don't know, Cummins was our producer last time. And they are a little higher this time, but they may have obtained more work in the marketplace because of previous bidding. And so, working us into the system may cost them more, whether it's location or not, makes a big difference. We did have 2 companies that were very interested from the get-go and showed a lot of interest in working with the city of St. Peter. And their bid showed that from that level. As you remember, on the front of the memo, last year Cummins did this for about $60,000.
I wasn't here last year.
Yeah, but,
You didn't go back through the old minutes?
yeah, and
Just that
so
memo.
their bid of 79,918 was about 20,000 higher. So they've either obtained some additional work, resources may be different than what they had when they bid it 5 years ago. But as long as the other 2 are that competitive and below where we were 5 years ago, I'm not too concerned about that. Both of those are pretty reputable companies, and we've checked resources for both of them.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Steve?
I have just one other question, Pete. Have you had any experience with advanced power?
We have not in the city of St. Peter.
Okay, all right, thanks.
But you are familiar with them.
We are familiar with them, yes.
We have no concerns about who's being recommended.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Questions? Comments? The resolution awarding the generator maintenance for Broadway Generation Plant and for citywide emergency generators appears on page 54. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll
So
make a
moved.
motion to approve.
Second?
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Clement.
Aye.
Who did you say?
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye. Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Next up, we have it's a lease modification for the St. Peter Community Child Care. Todd?
Mayor and members, your
And
Finance
Sally,
Director,
sorry.
Sally Vogel, is here to provide you the information on this. You did talk about this previously at a workshop, and Sally can explain what the recommendation is. Sal?
Sally, you want to pull that microphone over a little bit?
Yep, it's on. You're good to
It's
go.
on.
Okay. Mayor Zeman and council, we're here SPC or SP3C has come forward and asked if we could do a lease modification. And what they want to do is extend the lease through 2024. Currently, it runs through December 31st, 2019. They're asking that we honor the current lease through 2019 as a base lease payment, but then going forward, they will start paying additional $700 a month for a total of $1,000 a month towards their past due, which is $74,589. If we go forward and extend the lease through 2024 with the additional $1,000 a month, they'll pay $74,000 towards their past due. That's 74 months, because the additional payments will start in November 1st through of this year through December 31st. There is an additional $589 that they'll pay either upfront or at the end of the lease and get their past due forward. We believe that this is a good for both us and SP3C, that they can use we need daycare in the city, and it's a good use. They've been good leasers, and they've come forward saying that because of the improvements in the additional space, that they've been able to increase their enrollment. So enrollment's going very well. Each year from after 2019, so through 2020 through 2024, there'll be a 3% escalator added to the base each month, or each year. I wish each month, but each year. So they are continuing that they'll have the cash flow to be able to do this. So over the years, I know they had trouble before I started and for a while, but now they're back on their feet and they're rolling very well, and it's a good add to the community. So we're requesting that you approve this lease through the end of 2024.
Mayor, members,
Oh, sorry.
in addition, SP3C has approved this lease previously. You don't have a signed copy in your packet, but they have agreed to the terms.
Questions or comments? John?
And SP3C has made leasehold improvements to the building in their space, totaling some very large number,
Something in excess of $80,000.
and they have another one coming up for,
16.
For 16 for some tiles.
so it'll be around $100,000 of improvements they've made to our building.
Yep. On their dime, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Mayor, members, resolutions on page 65.
Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Piper?
Aye.
Councilmember Plum?
Aye.
Mayor Zima?
Aye.
Councilmember Carter?
Aye.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you, Sally.
Thanks, Sally. Next up, we have a 2019 Traverse des Sioux Library contract. Todd?
Mayor, members, we have two guests here tonight. One works for you, and one is, and Ann, forgive me, you are the executive director.
I am.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I had your
know,
title
it's always
appropriately.
different, isn't it?
Yeah, and so what we are here tonight is that the Traverse des Sioux Board has taken action to propose contracts to the various members. Doug and Ann are here to answer very specific questions relative to service and other things, but generally what you see in front of you is a series of 3 contracts that provide services just as you've seen in the past. I will tell you that there is an error within the body of the resolution, and the amount that is the total contract, all 3 contracts, is $26,727.68, not the $25,000 number. That 25 number is the number from the 2018 year, from your current year. These contracts are for next year, for the 2019 year, and again, $26,727.68. Traverse des Sioux is the library for libraries within our area and provide a lot of fantastic services to you that you could not operate the library in the way that you do currently without purchasing their services or providing in partnership funding for the services with the other libraries within your area. Again, if you have very specific questions, the folks here at the desk can answer those, but the contracts look good. One other thing that I'd mention to you is that prior to last year, you had one contract and you picked options. This is in accordance with what you did in 2018, but is different than 2017, 16, 15, et cetera. In that, in those previous years, there was one contract. This is divided up into 3 contracts for the additional levels of service that you purchase and are provided. Again, we don't have the ability, the horsepower, or in some instances, the technical skill to be able to do what Traverse de Sioux does for you and for your patrons. Again, there's a resolution in your packet, and we'd stand for questions.
Before we ask for questions, would you two please just identify yourselves so people watching going, who are those two?
I'm Doug Wolf, the
Yep.
lead librarian at the Public Library.
Okay, and Ann, please.
And I'm Ann Hokinson, and I'm Executive Director at Traverse de Sioux Library Cooperative, and we're headquartered in Mankato, and we serve 9 counties.
Right, thank you. Questions? Steve?
When I go through this list on page 68 and 67, how are these dollars calculated for each individual entity that's listed there?
Sure. Doug helps with that. What happens is that the members themselves, and St. Peter is one of them, so that group of people gets together and figures out the various weights that they feel are appropriate to put on collection size, on circulation, on population, on number of delivery stops, things like that. And then they calculate the amount of money that they feel is a fair and equitable distribution.
So there's some kind of a systematic order to it.
Very systematic, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? More, Steve?
Well, I don't know, I think we should get a discount just because Doug's such a nice guy.
That would be, that would be great, but it's not part of the algebraic formula
Oh,
that's put
I got
together.
it. Okay, all right.
All right. If there are no other questions, the resolution approving the execution of the library services contract with Traverse de Sioux Library System appears on page 99, and there is a change of number 2, which should read $26,727.68 instead of the number provided. And therefore, the numbers below there for the breakdown are not accurate also. But the
We don't
total
need to
number-
have this separation in
Right,
there.
but the total number would be that 26,727.68. With that being said, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
I'll second it with those changes.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Councilmember Coleman?
Aye.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Brand?
Aye.
Resolution is approved.
And Doug, thanks for coming.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
Thanks for waiting. Next up, we have a request for assistance for the Halloween Fun Run. Todd?
Mayor, members, the information is included in your packet. I might take a little bit more time than we have over the past couple of years because this includes a route change. And so we want to make sure that folks are aware of the planned route change based on the request by the Chamber of Commerce. They've actually considered this for a couple of years, and this is the first year that they're ready to undertake this change. And the event would be on October 27th, but the new location would start and end at the new high school and would utilize Jefferson Avenue, Rock Bend Parkway, Pine Point Curve, and areas within Pratt Circle and Meridian. So those are areas near the new high school as well as the high school trails. This has been, again, talked about for a couple of years. One of the drivers behind this change, according to Ed at the Chamber, as he and I discussed this, was that this makes really many fewer intersections for the runners to cross. It's believed that this is a substantially safer route than what you see throughout the rest of the community. It doesn't mean that it couldn't go back to the new route, but they really want to give this a try, and the facilities out at the new high school certainly can accommodate a lot of the activities, and the commons area, if you've been there, can accommodate many of the activities with the slightly scaled down version of activities that the Chamber's provided since they have undertaken this event from the city of St. Peter. Certainly, they're still required to have the insurance that you require, that $1.5 million, because they are going on city property and city streets. I have talked with the school superintendent, and of course, they've reserved the space, and he's aware of this, as are the building principals and all the folks that need to be aware of it from the high school perspective, utilizing the high school. You can't give approval to use the high school. That's something through the school district, and the superintendent has said that they are good to go from that perspective. The resolution is included in your packet on page 103, and this provides a rough map of where the route is going to go. So as they go out, as they leave the start, they will head south down Jefferson and go into the area that is Pine Point Curve and that subdivision. Then they will come back along Jefferson, and then they will go out through Pratt Circle and Meridian, utilizing the trails that are in place within Community Spirit Park. Again, the resolution's included in your packet, and happy to try and answer questions. They're looking to have approval, use a city pickup, use some cones, use some vests, use some flags, the kind of typical things that we provided to them in the past so that they can make the run a success.
Okay. Questions?
Just some comments. I'm interested to see how this works. I am very appreciative still that the Chamber of Commerce has taken on the management of this race, because I think it's very beloved by a lot of people in St. Peter. I'm a bit hesitant about this new route. One of the nice things about the previous location is that it really felt like a community event. It was very close to local businesses. All before and after the race, you would see people in costume walking through the grocery store, stopping at the coffee shop, those sorts of things. I think that with the new location, people are going to drive to the high school parking lot, run the race, get back in the car, and drive home. And so I think we're going to miss out on some of the connectedness to the rest of the community. That said, I recognize that this new route will probably require fewer volunteers and staff managing all the many intersections, so I can see the benefit from that side. But I think we're going to miss out on a little bit too, just as far as the location and the visibility and the engagement with the community.
Anyone else? One thing, though, Susie, this does go by Jerry's house, so, you know, they can be entertained
Great.
and he'll...
Wonderful. Don't heckle the runners. They're going to be tired by the time they get to your house.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yep.
I think Councilmember Carlin has identified some issues, and all of those are issues that I know the Chamber and their organizing group has talked about and thought about, and so I think they'll be curious to see how the experiment works out as well.
Anybody else?
And I would add, too, there was one other year where this was in a different location, where I think we held this out at River's Edge Hospital, or the start or finish was in a different location some years back.
So this is going off the best of my memory. I believe there have been technically 4 different routes.
Okay.
And I believe that you are right. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe it was 7 years ago.
7.
Where the start and end point were at different points. And
Yes.
so the start point was out near Galt Park, near the hospital.
Yes.
And so there has been some variation over the years.
Anybody else? The resolution approving request for city assistance for the Chamber of Commerce Halloween Fun Run and Little Monster Dash appears on pages 103 and 104. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved?
Second.
Any other comments or questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Grams?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Councilmember Plum?
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler?
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Brand?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have Sally, I think, is back, about preparation of assessments and a call for a public hearing. Sally?
Mr. Mayor and council members, starting the process, Huron's coming quickly. So we've, starting the utility assessments and a public hearing on the delinquent accounts. My staff has pulled together the numbers. As you can see, in 2018, we're at $20,661.02, and that's as of May 31st, 2018. That's our end date. So it's from 2017, June 1st of 2017 up to May 31st, 2018. These are the past due accounts that we've tried to collect per the policy. There's an increase of approximately $7,000 over last year for the assessable charges. Most of that is in one commercial property, the Bunker Hill Apartments. When that got sold to Boone Properties, there's a timing between the construction, and Boone Properties. So right now, there's about $5,951.61 that they have to figure out they'll be assessed to the Bunker Hill apartment. So that's the main increase that's gone on year over year. As we've said, balances under $10, discharge bankruptcies and death. We do not do any assessment to the properties at this point. So I'm asking for your approval that we set a public hearing for November 26th, and then I will put publications in the paper and we'll send property owners notifications next week.
Questions?
So, Mayor, members, there are two resolutions related to this action, one on page 108 and one on page 109. If we could handle them in that order, that would be great. And so the first one relates to providing for the roll, and the second one setting the date. So the first one we're looking for you to take action on is page 108.
Okay. Any questions? The resolution declaring unpaid charges for municipal utilities and preparing for proposed assessment appears on 108. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Now, any questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Councilmember Corning?
Aye.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Dolan?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Following that, we have the resolution calling for a public hearing for those said charges. That appears on page 109. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Corning?
Aye.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Brand?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer? Aye.
That resolution is approved. Next up, we have a call for a public hearing and a listing for the assessment of miscellaneous charges. Sally?
Yes, so going on to the next step, then there's the assessments for lawn mowing, snow removal, and a frozen meter. We have those, and then we also have the curb and gutter and sidewalk improvements that were done on the 3rd Street and some various properties throughout the city. So what I'm asking is that you set up, again, a preparation of the assessments and then a call in the public hearing on November 26th. So, and you have a list of who's had the special assessments done and who has the miscellaneous charges at the bottom of page 112.
Mayor, members, it's important to note that some of the folks on this list, this is not necessarily a delinquency list. In many instances, these are people who have agreed to an assessment for work that was done on or abutting their property that they're responsible for.
Yeah, and there's about 4 or 5 that have already been invoiced and have paid for their assessments. And these are the ones that have sent the letters back, signed, and approved that they will be assessed.
Okay. About in the middle of the page, I would think, where it says years, those would be the indicators then that,
Right, and those are based on the level that you had out there.
right. Questions? If not, the resolution declaring unpaid charges to be assessed and ordering preparation of proposed assessment of these charges appears on page 113. Is there a motion for approval?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Brand?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer? Aye. Councilmember Corning?
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have pertaining to these assessments, a call for a public hearing. That resolution appears on page 114. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on this? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Carlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Brand?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer? Aye. Councilmember Corning?
Aye.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye. Resolution is approved. That concludes our new business. Next, we go into reports. The only thing I wanted to remind people that Thursday at 4 o'clock, there is a dedication, grand opening for the Solus Project, which is located on northeast of the community hospital, Rivers Edge Hospital. And glad to see that project is coming to fruition, so public is invited. Todd?
Mayor, members, just wanted to remind folks that if you haven't noticed, there's an election coming up in a couple of weeks here. And so there's been a lot of advertising surrounding that. And one of the things that we've tried to promote is a change in the polling place in the north end of the community, which was, or has been for many years at the Armory. It is now going to be located at the fairgrounds at Johnson Hall. So again, just to remind folks, if you voted at the Armory before, this time around, you will be voting at the fairgrounds at Johnson Hall. And so please watch for that, and we'd love you to be there. The next item that we have is just a report from Pete, if I could, to take a few moments to talk about a meeting that we have twice a year with the athletic associations. We just had one last Tuesday night. And so we have a number of goals with that, but Pete, let me have you talk about that just a bit.
Sure. On a regular basis, the rec department and their staff and Public Works and our staff meet with the association representatives in a public meeting, along with St. Peter Public Schools, Gustavus, and of course our staff. We sit down and we talk about facility updates and a lot of the capital planning that we're going to go through during the upcoming year. We try to work with the associations to find out, one, is your membership growing, sinking, shrinking, whatever might happen in those situations. And then we talk about what improvements can be made so that we can make things happen for our community here. This year we did discuss quite a few opportunities that are out there. Talked about Community Spirit Park, Galt Park, Jefferson, and Betts to some lengthy detail. We also had a presentation on the field house. Brian Paulson was here along with some staff from ISG, and then they talked about how the field house is coming to fruition from that point of view. The rec department also made an offer to a lot of the associations to help them with registration. Using our software and our staff expertise, we think we can help a lot of those guys pull together a little easier time during registration, get their numbers coordinated and their membership organized, and so we hope that that works for them. And then associations share what they'd like to do. A majority of the associations are very active. They've got great leadership. They bring a lot to the table. They're willing to participate with the city to make things happen. So we feel very positive on how things are going with our associations throughout town.
Really, our goals for this are to talk about the plans that you have in place and the park board has in place, to listen to the plans that they have and the activities that they have going on, and a great opportunity to share information. There's no monopoly on common sense there, and as those associations can share information, not just with us, but amongst each other, they all find better success, we think, and so that's one of the reasons for those meetings. So I wanted to make folks aware of that. Thank you, Pete, very much. Last item that I have is Haunted Hayride, just to make sure that folks know that parking is a little bit more restricted downtown at City Hall, and there's been a few bumps in the road and parking here and not there and other places, but it's going well. My understanding and a discussion with the Trail Association, the Snowmobile Trail Association, who sponsors that they had a fantastic weekend last weekend, and so they're up again this upcoming weekend, Friday and Saturday, as I recall. And so I think a good time was had by most, for sure. If you can call being scared a good time, I guess. But they had a good time, and certainly have worked very diligently to ensure that they have a successful event. The funding for that goes towards maintenance of snowmobile trails in our area. Mayor and members, the last one that I have is just to remind members that next Monday night, let me rephrase that, next Monday afternoon, you have a goal-setting session starting at 3 o'clock here in this room, and so I wanted to make sure the public knew about that and remind you packets will come out here in their normal time frame for that activity. My hope is to have you done before Halloween, and so we'll hope that that'll be the case. But again, you'll start at 3 o'clock in the governor's room here
I
next
remember you
Monday.
being this funny. I don't know what happened.
Well, maybe it's not working, but we're giving it a try today. Anyway, just a reminder for you folks, and if folks have additional questions or information, certainly want to encourage them to visit our website. They can certainly see the council packet that all of you get and see on our website, along with lots of other great information. So that's my plug for tonight, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Anyone else? Anything to add? Steve?
Just to follow up on my 6-year-old grandson, he went on Thursday, and he said it's the best one he's ever been on, the Haunted Hayride. So I'm hoping that Jerry and our mayor will come with me this weekend and attend.
Are you going again? When are you going?
I'll be going this probably Friday night.
All right.
Sure.
That won't scare me. I gotta be meeting with Pete tomorrow. That scares me.
All right.
In the morning, no less.
Anyone else? If not, not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.